are moving on to Proposition K, affordable housing authorization. What we got here, Article 34 of the state constitution provides in part that no low rent housing project shall be developed, constructed, or acquired by any public body, including a city and county, until the voters in that jurisdiction where the project will be located have approved the project. So this is a big state rule that we have to follow. And what does this specific proposition do? It would authorize our city by ordinance to own, develop, construct, rehabilitate, or acquire up to 10,000 residential units of low rent housing projects within the city for the purpose of providing affordable rental housing. This will authorize the city to take any actions necessary to implement that ordinance subject to applicable laws. So this is a huge step in the direction of the city constructing, owning, developing houses for people or apartments, housing. And so connect the dots. The Constitution says there has to be approval, and this is coming before us. The overall fiscal impact. Should it be approved? The passage itself would will have minimal impact on the cost of government. However, if the city decides to actually create the government structure and staffing to fully utilize authorization, the cost would be significant. If approved, city policymakers would next need to assess and decide which functions to be directly conducted by the city, whether it's acquiring property, building the actual housing, managing the housing, developing the housing, all these little steps that have to happen before people can move in. At the city's discretion, this would include identifying the expansion or modification of city agency structures, new process, new staff. You know, it's a huge step forward in the public sector, you know, taking a huge step into the housing industry. But there's no plans yet. I mean, obviously people are thinking about it. People have thought about it for a long time. All this does is authorize the city to actually start doing that if, you know, the city decides to do that. Which is leading me to the slide here. Voting yes would that mean it would authorize the city to develop or acquire up to 10,000 units. No would mean they would not be allowed. So they can't do it. Alrighty. Any questions regarding the background information?
Is there do they specify a location where they're going to build the housing, or it's just, the city can do whatever they want? So what does that mean when they say like the city can acquire 10,000 housing?
So all it means is that if the city were to do so, doing it would not be illegal or unconstitutional, because you know, it's just hoops you got to jump through. Back in the day, people of California put in this as part of the Constitution that says no city or county is allowed to develop public housing for low-income people without gaining the approval of the population of that entity, here being the city and county of San Francisco. And so this is like literally step 0.001 if anybody was even thinking about building more low-income housing in the city. So yeah, it's I guess kind of nuanced, but it's a very teeny tiny step that you have to clear, which is what we're doing here with this vote. So if it doesn't pass, then the city, you know, then the plans for, you know, buying land and building houses for poor people, that's a non-starter. You can't even think about doing that without getting a approval vote on this question, whether it be this year, next year, 10 years later, what have you.
Okay, thanks.
Arguments in favor of the proposition. The racist backstory. So it's interesting, the for and against sides argue about the causes of problems regarding housing. So this story told by the proponents say that Article 34 was created and passed in the 50s by segregationists who want to block affordable housing, excuse me, and exclude Black tenants. In white neighborhoods, housing for Blacks cannot be built without their permission. San Francisco must continue to move forward to reverse the displacement of people of color and reduce the cost of housing so that working people can afford to live here. So this is an argument saying that the policy is racist and therefore we should, we have to deal with it by getting the approval. But proponents would also suggest, hey, we should just strike that from our Constitution in general. But that's not what this is about specifically. Any questions? Argument one. All right, move on. Argument two. This will combat homelessness. Prop K would authorize the creation of municipal social housing. This is a form of permanent affordable housing for the public good. It'll charge low rents and it'll house a broad range of incomes. European nations have already done this, not to mention other states. Social housing is an important and innovative strategy to address displacement and homelessness. There are people who believe that having secure and safe housing will, do more for the homeless population than all the stuff that we're doing right now, which is not housing, which is, all these measures that Jenny can tell us about if she wants. But all of it is less helpful than providing safe and secure housing, which is, one of the primary human needs. All right, the next argument in favor is that it's free. Okay, so this is kind of a technical argument that this specific proposition will not do anything right away without further approval from the voters in the city. And so this will not cost taxpayers anything. It's like a technical argument. It's not the most substantive.
That's a weak argument.
Boo. All right, arguments against the proposition. Government is inept. The government does not run housing well. They turn it into dangerous slums and ghettos, and we should be cautious of the idea of public housing. So yeah, I mean, and I can add a little flavor to this. My house in the city is like 3 blocks from a housing project, and it's a bad part of town. So that's an anecdote. It has to be managed better if we're going to put a lot of really low income folks together without the resources they need to stabilize people's lives and such. Argument number 2 against the proposition that it'll be super expensive to maintain and upkeep and develop. So voting yes on this will, kind of open the floodgates to politicians saying, hey, we can now do this and we should do it and let's do it. And you guys can imagine the costs associated with buying land, hiring people to build, housing and all this other stuff. So it will be expensive, certainly. Okay, this argument here against the proposition says that government will cause more problems than it solves. And this was part of the back and forth regarding the backstories that the two sides are trying to get voters to listen to. This backstory says that the housing crisis that we currently face is a result of government adding a lot of regulations and costs to development with taxes and hoops that developers have to jump through. And so let me pull up the argument real quick. It's from the main opposition is the Libertarian Party. And so, this is the flavor of their arguments. I'll pull it up because it's pretty interesting. And I think it, probably has, like all arguments, some grain of truth in there. I think I can find it super fast. I think I'll get back to it while we're discussing. Moving on to the rebuttals. All right, so the rest of the slides are unfinished. I could fill them out. We could fill them out together, or we could just discuss. So we're going back to argument 1. And the rebuttal against this argument, which says that the history of Article 34 is racist and is an example of systematic racism. So we want to have a conversation about the backstory. It might not be as productive as a conversation about the, who are the population that is better served by public housing for low-income folks. Historically, it's more people of color. And so I guess the conversation here is about, whether or not the whole endeavor of public housing is worth chasing. And let's talk about, let's talk about the concept of systematic racism here. Would public housing be an effective tool against systematic racism? What do people think?
Can you repeat the question?
The question might not be the best question, but the question was, would public housing, is public housing something that is, good and desirable, and does it help the populations that it would serve, which are more people of color?
I think it really depends on like who's in charge, because like historically, people that are in charge of like creating neighborhoods, like they would put like what do you call it, minorities in locations that are farther away from like food, supermarkets and gas and stuff. So like that is like part of it. But I mean, I don't know anything about it now, but it's just a thought that I had.
So I think I heard Jenny say that in the past, the government has actually used its zoning tools and its housing tools to kind of what's the word, subjugate, not the best word, people of color, maybe to certain areas. That would seem to be an argument against the proposition that we don't want the government involved in any of this housing, building housing for people. So what do people think? So are people will lean more toward that idea, or the idea that government should be involved with housing in order to do it better or do it right and help people of color, low income people? Where do people lean on that question?
I think government should create housing for people, because if you ask me like if housing is a right or not, I would lean toward yes. Just
Why?
because I feel like, if we have the resources and we're so technologically advanced that we can do it, why don't we do it and kind of alleviate the stress? It could be like, a small house or something like that, but housing it's important. And if you don't have a house and you're a person who's homeless, it's really stressful for them to worry about housing and also find a job and et cetera, et cetera. So if the government can help do that for people, then I think it would create a better society.
Okay, but do you trust government to execute this program without being racist, like Jenny said they were in the past?
Yes, because in today's world, we all have phones and stuff, so we can record, any racist behavior.
Yeah, I second that. I feel like it's easier to get involved in the whole process of, permitting and where is it going to be constructed and how is it going to be paid for. And like this whole online gathering that we're doing right now is kind of an example of this sort of ease of access of information. So like, yeah, I mean, if public housing projects were created in the past that were not kosher, it was much harder to get involved, right? And these days it's easier to get involved, so that's cool.
Yeah, that's like the magic thing about government and democracy. You know, the people allowed it to happen 50 years ago. Well, 50 years ago is different from today, where citizens are a little more woke and they can hold their government to much higher standards. And today, some of us have a lot more faith in the government to execute certain missions. So with the same amount of, with relatively same amount of power, the potential of government programs are drastically different. Let's go to the next slide here. Okay, that it will fight homelessness by providing housing for low income folks. Does anyone think that it would be harmful, that it won't help the homelessness issue? Someone might say that the costs are going to be so exorbitant that it'll somehow make more homeless people, or something along those lines. Is anyone sympathetic to that line of thought, that this may do more harm than good regarding the homelessness situation if we have more public housing, that is? Doesn't sound like people are super sympathetic to that line of reasoning. I don't know. Let's try to imagine a world where we are embarking on more public housing. The only downside is really the cost. I mean, I don't think anyone would argue that people don't deserve homes. Well, some people might. They won't think that housing is a right. You somehow have to earn it. Some people might not. Some people will say that people don't deserve housing. So, if you're a crackhead or whatever, people will say, that's your fault. You don't want to work. You don't want to do any of this. Well, this opens up a can of worms, of course, a long discussion. But so I guess we say in general, and let's not be mistaken. This is a pretty big step, because this isn't being put on the ballot for no reason. It's not like we're gonna pass this and then forget about the idea of public housing, because we in the city know exactly how bad the problem is. Any general comments?
What was the question?
There was no specific question. The question is, the argument in favor says that this will help fight homelessness, and we were exploring any possible rebuttals that it won't help homelessness or it'll make the problem worse.
I think the best way to fight homelessness is to give people homes.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, there are a lot of different ways we could do that, but I feel like we don't really spend a lot of money looking into those different ways of really figuring it out. We kind of just leave it up to the free market, and it's like,
it's not working.
No, the evidence is pretty clear that the free market doesn't service everybody.
Mm-hmm. That's where the Libertarian Party comes in and says, well, the only reason it's not working is because the government has created so many obstacles, make it more expensive to build, and therefore costs of housing and prices of housing increase too much, and that's why we have homelessness. So
I don't know about that.
Right. Jackie, Andy, do you guys have any thoughts on this one?
Jackie has some thoughts. Oh wait, it's a meal already. Yeah. Oh, wait, what was we talking about? Public housing. Oh, it's just any thoughts in general. Well, I don't know. I think the whole each new apartment building that's built, they need at least 10% of them is Section 8, which is low income housing. I think that's been working pretty well, because I think if like a government makes up like a project area specifically for like poor people, that area is gonna be like really bad.
Yeah, like anytime public housing comes in the form of projects, it always leads to higher murder rates, higher robbery rates, higher assaults, and more crime in general. It never alleviates the problem. I mean, yeah, it gives housing to like, I don't know, 50 more families, but on the scale that homelessness is happening in SF, that is nothing. Yeah, so I feel like the only kind of public housing that the government should be investing in is anytime they open a brand new skyrise that's like full of apartments for bougie ass people, that like maybe 20% of those units should go to low income units as well. Because it's anytime there's like, you know, like Jackie and I was talking about, Japantown used to be a thriving community. And then all of a sudden they started building projects around there. And then basically just turned into a very terrible neighborhood eventually. So it doesn't really solve the problem. It actually just creates more.
And I kind of don't want to agree with the Libertarian Party, but it's kind of true that like, not just homelessness, not just like California-based homeless. There's also a lot of homeless people that are coming from out of state.
Yeah.
That's coming to California because we have so much more better benefits, and it's easier for them to get access for free food and stuff. So I don't know.
Yeah.
I would definitely respond to that last point about whether or not the majority of our homeless are from out of state or even out of county. I would have to pull up the actual studies and stuff, but as far as I believe, the majority of the homeless in San Francisco are from California, from the Bay Area. And the number one cause of homelessness is simply, well, guess what? It's not having money. So,
show me the proof.
Oh, okay. I will for sure.
Wait, what's wrong with Japantown? What's going on with Japantown? Why is
Japantown?
Why is it so
used to be a
shitty?
very nice community that was full of Japanese people, and because government housing has built up all these projects around there, eventually all the Japanese people eventually moved out, and just the surrounding areas of Japantown are no longer as nice as they used to be.
Well, that and the whole World War II concentration camp thing.
Yeah, that is the whole concentration camp. But besides the concentration camp, what's still there is the government housing, and it's just not as nice as over there.
I kind of disagree. I don't know. I've like my grandpa had a.
I think you're wrong, William.
Well, I mean, you know, my mom has an accounting firm. Like she operates as an accountant. My uncle has an accounting business, like right in the heart of Japantown. So I grew up in that area basically. I would go there all the time, and I feel like it's pretty much remained the same. Like it's not that bad. In fact, like I don't know. I feel like part of the character of the place is being sort of warped by the nearby Fillmore Street, like especially like northern Fillmore Street.
I think that's what they mean.
Yeah, it's more like from Divisadero to Fillmore is now like, I guess on not on the Japantown side, but like on the other side, from Divisadero to Fillmore is all projects for government housing, and those areas are known to be very dangerous.
Oh yeah, okay. Then I think we're talking about different areas. Yeah.
Yeah, like the area that's just adjacent of Japantown, like on the Laguna and stuff like that, those are fine. Like from Laguna to like St. Mary's Cathedral, solid neighborhoods. But from Divisadero to Fillmore, like the gateway before it gets into Japantown is all like government housing in that one side.
Yeah, man. You're on the wrong side of the tracks in that case. I mean, that's just like zoning law, like the country over has always been sort of like concentrating.
We'll bring it back to the larger conversation by saying it. You know, San Francisco is a small city, so you know, Andy was saying, you know, when there's a public housing in just one block, it spreads to other areas of the city.
Yeah, the crime rate spikes in that area, so it's like not the best.
Yeah. So yeah, let's talk about that substantial point here. So Jackie and Andy said the city already has a policy of mandating a certain percentage of new units be affordable, and that's a better policy. We should keep doing that instead of concentrating low-income folks into one building or something like that. And so that's something to think about. I don't know. Does that make does that put people toward a no on this proposition?
Wait, what does?
The idea that we should spread out low-income folks across units throughout the city by having that a certain percentage of maybe every building, or at least every new building for sure, but every apartment building must have 10-20% low income or affordable housing, versus city should build a whole building in a certain area and concentrate low income folks together. What do you think about that?
I mean, I agree with the idea of having a percentage of new housing that is built be, mandate that to be low income housing. But I'm not entirely sure why we can't do both and just not concentrate the publicly owned social housing, like spread that out to different parcels, not just like put it in the same neighborhood, all in the same neighborhood, but keep I don't know.
I mean, I hear definitely hear both sides. It makes me think of a bit of a tangent, but related. I don't know if you guys heard of France's current social problems, where the last 10 or 15 years they allowed a lot of refugees to come into their country, and I guess they congregate in certain neighborhoods, as most communities do. And okay, the backstory is there's a huge controversy and crazy shit going on right now in France, where there were 3 terrorist attacks in the last 2 months, I think. Some poor old lady was beheaded in a church a few days ago.
What, in a church? I thought there was somebody who was beheaded who was a teacher.
Yeah, so there's more than one beheading in the last couple of months, and these are from quote unquote radicalized Muslim population. And so I thought of it because obviously we're not having the same crazy shit in the US, but basically the argument against concentrating a lot of low income folks together is that it might cause more crime and more crazy stuff to happen, as opposed to maybe if someone would say, maybe if you spread out the refugees across France instead of letting them congregate in one small part of the big city, you might have avoided this crazy stuff going on. So a little bit of a tangent, but also a little related. Anyone have thoughts on this question? So if you were if you really are concerned about this congregation, this increase in crime, that has happened before with grouping low-income people together, then you would say, why don't we just go more along the other path of maybe increasing the percentages of affordable housing that is required of new buildings and maybe even existing buildings. You might vote against this proposition. On the other hand, if you think that though that is too small, percentages of buildings, it will never make a dent in the number of homelessness that we have and are going to have. We need bigger, bolder action. We will vote toward yes and moving toward completely public housing. And this is a correct argument, so we're not really gonna go over it. So yeah, obviously this doesn't cost anything right now, but it will allow things that will cost a lot of money. We can spend a few minutes here. About the cost, right? So if this does pass, some politicians will say we need to move quicker and let's hurry up and build the public housing. And this will cost incredible amounts of money. And so this is something that we have to consider. We will probably foresee this in the future if this does pass, either now or the future. The question is, are you willing to pay it if your taxes increase? Or do you think that the large corporations should pay a lot more? And we go back to the same theme of, okay, we tax the big corporations too much. We're just a small city. Are they going to move, right across the bay? Just have their workers commute, and we get screwed. We lose a lot of tax revenue and all this stuff. Any thoughts on this?
I think they should increase the requirements of qualifying for this low-income housing. I know a lot of people that work. I know some people that work, I guess, cash jobs or just really, really minimal hours to qualify, because rent is only a few $100s. So if you apply for Medi-Cal, you get like financial aid in terms of, I don't know, like some kind of stipend that you get every week, or like just like EDD, you can already afford rent. And I feel like it really it incentivizes laziness in a way. And I feel like if you just raise, I'm not saying make it so you have to have like a full-time job to afford public housing. I'm just saying, like, if you were to like incentivize people to work a little bit harder to like qualify for financial housing, it would be a little bit more effective, I guess.
I feel like the problem with incentivizing laziness, like that whole argument, is that right now, when it comes to welfare programs, when it comes to these things that you qualify for, and then you do get a full-time job afterwards, then you lose those benefits, and there's no like tapering off. And I feel like that's the real problem. That's the real problem with that. That's the crux of the issue. Like, there's this thing called, like, there's this donut hole of benefits, right? Where it's like, if you're so poor that you make no money at all, then we'll give you all these benefits. But as soon as you start making like, as soon as you get a full-time minimum wage job, then you get kicked off the payroll, and it's like, oh, now I'm making less than I was before by doing nothing. I might as well go back to doing nothing. I feel like public housing kind of plays into that a little bit.
I agree with you. I think that should change too. Like, for an example, like, to qualify for financial aid for college, you need to make $6,000 and under for like CSU. I don't know about UCs, but for CSU to qualify for financial aid, you have to make $6,000 a year and under. How do you expect anyone to live in SF and make less than $6,000 a year? So I think I totally agree with you. I think it should be a two-way fix, where you can still, once you get a low paying minimum wage full-time job, you should then qualify for public housing, not so much the other way around.
I just want to chime in real quick. You mentioned last time that I am currently living in a BMR unit. So it's a below market rate unit. So how it works is that they have an annual AMI, the average median income, to qualify to own housing in San Francisco. And what happened is that they change it every year to match the average income in San Francisco. And what happens is that you have to go through this really rigorous process in order to obtain a unit. And what happened is that I asked the same question, like, hey, like, I only qualify because I make XYZ for now. What happens in the future? And they don't care. They're like,
yeah,
like, we're glad that you're making more money. That's great, so they won't take it away. And also, it's a bit unethical to give you public housing and then just take it away, because then it's a liability. You're responsible for these people, and like, they background checked me, everything. So I think someone mentioned earlier about worrying if they make too much money, they'll be kicked out. Probably not. If anything, they do want you to make money. What I'm guessing is that they're hoping that, hey, you make enough money to not live here. Because right now I live in a condo, So hopefully that if I make enough money, I don't want to live here anymore, I could just sell the place. Even though I bought this place already, what happened is that I'm constantly getting updates about what are some of the houses that are on sale still, and people are selling all their, constantly doing resale of their BMR unit.
So, oh, well, I mean, so you bought that that BMR unit, and as far as I understand, you can't sell for a profit, right? If you do sell.
You can't sell for a profit, but every year there's a 2% increase on your property value. You can't sell at market rate, current market rate.
Okay, yeah. And that's a different program than, for example, affordable units in, you know, new buildings that people have to, you know, rent.
Right. I mean, yeah, no, I understand, but it's just that like I'm just putting an example that since just SF is doing such a good job doing this, because then I'm considered, you know, below low income, and I was able to obtain a unit here in a very nice neighborhood because you have to allocate at least, I think, like 20% of the condos to people who are low income. So, I mean, if we were to approve this, then I feel like San Francisco's already doing a great job. I don't know about the California as a whole because I know we have other cities have issues like LA. They have like a huge homeless population there.
Yeah. Where are you at? Can I ask, Diana?
Huh?
Where are you at in town?
Where was I? What? Sorry.
Where is your condo located in town?
It's in Dogpatch. I'm like 4 blocks away from the Chase Center.
Yeah, that's District 10, right?
Yeah. By the way, BMR unit for a single person looking for 1 bedroom, it's like 80. Like the maximum income you can make is like $88,000 pre-tax.
How was the process? Did you have to wait a few years, or was it a lottery?
It's a lottery system. There's people, I heard stories from other people that they've been here for like 5 years, 2 years, didn't get anything. We got lucky. We started in January of last year. We got the place in December, but it's a really long process.
Nice.
Congrats, you just moved in.
What's it like in Dogpatch?
It's nice. The food here is great. Everybody's nice. But our
I
place getting
like the bakeries over there.
Oh, but our place keeps getting breaking into, so.
Alrighty.
Not good. But like, I feel like that's an example of not necessarily government produced, government owned housing, right? It's kind of like a proportion of privately produced housing, privately built housing that is allocated for lower income people, right? That's like an example of the other type of housing. And we're not necessarily talking about that, or is that the same thing? I'm not sure.
No, it's different. I would ask Diana, are you leaning toward a yes or no on this proposition if you want to share?
Actually, I don't know. This actually kind of brought up another thing that happened when the city was trying to build a homeless shelter along the Embarcadero. And what happened was that all these people from the neighborhood opposed it because of the same issues, like, oh, it's gonna be increased robbery, increase like this, and decrease property value. And that's what they're really trying to protect, the value of their homes. And they got so much opposition from people who are very rich, because apparently around that area people are really rich there. They hired lawyers and they managed to get the city to stop building a homeless shelter on the Embarcadero. But guess what? There's still like a ton of homeless people along the Embarcadero. So I don't know.
Well, I'm curious, is a homeless shelter the same as the affordable housing units that would be built or that would be allowed by this proposition? Or those, I feel like those things are kind of different from one another. Like a shelter is only temporary housing.
The sameness here is the concentration of low income folks who are purely in a different state of mind than, you know, your rich, you know, professionals or what have you. And this brings along, you know, crime and low property values. Does that clear that up well?
Even echo.
Sorry, I'm like cooking while trying to talk.
A yes would move the city in a direction of more ambitious public housing projects, which will be expensive. And there's the issue of concentrating a lot low-income folks in one spot. A vote no would say we should pursue, addressing the housing issue through methods that we are already doing, such as the percentage thing that we're doing with new units.
I think the whole thing. Oh shit.
Yes, go ahead.
I'm so sorry.
Oh, no problem. A no would say we should continue the current methods. For example, Diana's program and other ones. Okay, in the interest of time, we are going on to our next proposition. And I don't think we have slides for this. So,
Oh, I could go through this one.
oh, yes, please.